This is the story of Queen Elizabeth II and the country she has reigned over for 60 glorious years. She has worked with 12 British Prime Ministers and their governments, united 54 sovereign states into our Commonwealth family. Through turbulent times and unprecedented change, tragedy and celebration, our monarch has been ever present, our symbol of stability and strength. These are the Queen's diamond decades. Born on the 21st of April, 1926, Princess Elizabeth Alexandra Mary was a year old when she was presented to the world by her parents, the then Duke and Duchess of York. 4 years later, her sister Margaret was born, and together they enjoyed a relatively quiet royal existence with their doting parents. Third in line to the throne, Elizabeth never truly expected to inherit the crown. But in 1936, her uncle, King Edward VIII, abdicated so he could marry American divorcee Wallis Simpson. This set Princess Elizabeth's destiny in stone. One day, she would be queen.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family, to which we all belong.
Although World War II had ended 5 years earlier, the start of the 50s was tough. Families across Great Britain were still struggling to get back on their feet. Food was in short supply, and rationing, a crucial wartime necessity, continued.
That's your ration for the week. There's no more.
Is this all?
That's the lot.
Well, what am I supposed to do with that?
Mr. Warner, what do you think of this new meat rationing?
Oh, I think it's terrible. It's a terrible problem for us butchers, and even a worse problem for the housewife.
But God, what does a man live on? 11 a meat? Disgusting.
They tell me on 2 ration books I can just have a piece of steak or chops, so this week I've got steak, next week I'll have chops. 1 week a meat pie, next week chops. I say we'll have to go on.
Amongst the other hardships for those living in Britain's cities, smog was also an escalating problem. But amidst these dark days, there was some positive news. A new member of the royal family had been born. At King's Cross Station, Princess Elizabeth made her first public appearance after the birth of her daughter, Princess Anne. Aged just 24, the heir to the throne was a Royal Navy officer's wife and now mother of 2.
The princess looking after her daughter, Nurse Lightbody, puts Prince Charles on the train. And now the most famous little family in the world is on its way in the Aberdonian to show the baby to grandfather, just like any other little family. For the king has not yet seen his granddaughter.
King George VI, Elizabeth's father, was waiting for them at Balmoral, the family home in Scotland. When they arrived, Prince Charles, like any toddler, was restless.
It's very boring for an important young man to find himself suddenly not the center of attraction. And obviously, just now, nobody seems to be interested in him, except the cameraman. Now that's better. Princes aren't supposed to go off on their own, at least not so young.
For the young princess, it was also a worrying time, as her father was seriously ill. It would be 4 weeks before the frail King George VI was well enough to return to London to be part of a very special event.
Buckingham Palace, scene of so much of this island's history, is the fairy tale setting for a story complete with fairy princess, the Princess Anne Elizabeth Alice Louise, newly christened and lovely in the traditional christening frock.
The Duke of Edinburgh, the proud father, and King George VI were at Princess Elizabeth's side. along with her mother, the Queen, and grandmother, Queen Mary. 4 generations had gathered to celebrate this royal family occasion. In the spring of 1951, the king was back on duty. Known to his family as Bertie, he had overcome a severe stammer, which had made public speaking a torturous ordeal. Still looking frail, the conscientious and ever-dedicated king opened the Festival of Britain.
The 2 world wars have brought us grievous loss, and though the nation has made a splendid effort towards recovery, new burdens have fallen upon it, and dark clouds still overhang the whole world. Yet this is no time for despondency, for I see this festival as a symbol of Britain's abiding courage and vitality. I declare the Festival of Britain open.
Thousands braved the typical British weather to see 27 acres of bomb-damaged wasteland by the River Thames transformed into high-tech pavilions and galleries to give people hope that a better and brighter future lay ahead. Supported as ever by his Queen, King George VI was determined to see the country emerge from the aftermath of war. But just weeks later, there was worrying news.
The king was gravely ill. The nation prayed.
The king had been diagnosed with cancer and was admitted to hospital. As he underwent life-saving surgery, well-wishers gathered outside the palace, waiting for news. Finally, it came. The king had survived, but his health remained a cause for concern. A tour of the Commonwealth had been planned for the beginning of the new year, but the king was too frail to undertake such a punishing schedule. In his place, he sent Princess Elizabeth and Prince Philip, but unbeknownst to them, it was to be their final farewell.
Nairobi, capital of Kenya, is en fete to welcome the royal visitors. Giant tribal chiefs and representatives of Kenya's many races assemble at the airport to await the airliner from London. Warlike Maasai chiefs and warriors with lion's mane headdress, from lions they've hunted and killed with spears, assemble to do honor to the king's daughter.
Leaving Prince Charles and Princess Anne at home, the young royal couple would have some time alone before fulfilling more official duties in Australia and New Zealand. Wherever they went, they received a tremendous welcome.
Their Royal Highnesses will holiday at Royal Lodge, the beautiful wood and stone house, a wedding present from the Kenya government. They will surely always remember Kenya for this.
But sadly, this would not be the case. 6 days later came the gravest of news.
It was announced from Sandringham at 10:45 today that the king passed peacefully away in his sleep.
In an instant, the young princess was now queen. Around the country, cannon fire commemorated her father, King George VI, who had died aged just 56. The new queen immediately returned home. Dutiful and composed, she was greeted in London by her father's dear friend and her first Prime Minister, Winston Churchill. It was a relationship that would go from strength to strength. The next day, at St. James's Palace, the official proclamation was made.
With one voice and consent of tongue and heart, publish and proclaim that the high and mighty Princess Elizabeth Alexandra Mary is now, by the death of our late sovereign of happy memory, become Queen Elizabeth II, by the grace of God, Queen of this realm.
God save the Queen. Hip, hip. Hooray! Hip, hip. Hooray! Hip, hip. Hooray!
As the country celebrated their new monarch, they also remembered their gallant king, who had served them so honourably for over 15 years.
By day and throughout the night, a great pilgrimage formed and reformed along the walls of Westminster. One by one, his people said farewell.
On February the 15th, 1952, the king's veiled widow and both daughters were at his side as they began the solemn procession through London's silent streets. Leading the cortege was the Duke of Windsor, the king's older brother, who had abandoned the crown 16 years earlier. Prime Minister Winston Churchill spoke for the nation.
Never at any moment, in all the perplexities at home and abroad, in public or in private, did he fail in his duties. Well does he deserve the farewell salute of all his governments and peoples.
King George VI was finally laid to rest in St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle. He would be remembered for the honour and gentle glory he brought to the throne. Breaking with court mourning, the Queen performed her first public engagement at Westminster Abbey 2 months after her father's funeral. Many believed they were experiencing the dawn of a new Elizabethan era.
In the service, Maundy pennies were distributed by the Queen, one for each year of her age. The little silver coins are specially minted. That's Count Michael Williams of Westminster. It's the first time since good Queen Bess that a reigning queen has personally distributed the Maundy money. To Elizabeth II on this, the first public engagement as Queen, it is fitting to wish as prosperous a reign as that of her great predecessor.
But in early 1953, it was a natural disaster that challenged the new Queen. Devastating floods swept the east coast of England, destroying thousands of households and claiming the lives of 307 people. The royal family sprung into action.
The Duke of Edinburgh begins his tour of the flooded areas in a naval duck. He has already flown over much of the land to see for himself the scale of the disaster.
The Queen Mother headed to Cambridge to support local volunteers as they prepared and packed clothing and essentials for the flood victims.
The Queen continues her journey to Tilbury. At all places she visits, crowds are delighted at the interest Her Majesty shows in their welfare. Summing up the feelings of all in Britain, the Queen expresses her heartfelt sympathy for those who have lost so much in the disaster.
This time also brought more personal grief for the royal family.
Queen Mary is dead. This great lady of Britain, whose life spanned 6 reigns. With grief born of respect and love, the nation learns the sad tidings.
The Queen's grandmother had survived her husband, 3 of her children, and 2 world wars. As the country was still struggling to get back on its feet, it had been decided to delay the actual coronation for a year or so. As Churchill put it bluntly, can't have coronations with bailiffs in the house. As the weeks passed, British high streets became busier and busier. Trade was on the up, and the shopkeepers were experiencing a boom they had not seen in years. The post-war blues were nearly over. Throughout the following weeks and months, the Queen continued to fulfill her royal engagements, and one in particular had a special place in her heart: to name and launch the new royal yacht commissioned by her late father, George VI. For months, the whole country had hotly debated what this new ship would be called, but the only person who knew was Her Majesty the Queen. Known as Job 691, 30,000 spectators turned up in anticipation.
I name the ship Britannia. I wish success to her and to all who sail in her.
This would be the Queen's home from home, her floating palace. Over the coming decades, it would also become her sanctuary. With only 6 weeks to go before the coronation, the public were enjoying a phenomenon summed up simply as coronation fever. The most famous jewels in the world were with Garrard & Co., but this wasn't the only glittering crown. The Queen was among thousands of spectators at Wembley to watch Stanley Matthews, the most loved footballer in all England, finally win the FA Cup.
I'm told that by 1 or 2 people that I was the match winner. As a matter of fact, I don't believe that for the simple reason we have here 11 match winners.
After a year of preparation, the coronation was just days away. Tens of thousands came from all over the world to be part of the biggest event since VE Day. The people were determined not to miss the crowning of their beautiful young monarch. 27 miles of seating was put through vigorous military testing. And as crowd numbers climbed steadily towards 3 million, an extra 8,000 policemen were drafted in to help. There was big news from the BBC as well. They would broadcast the coronation live. Television sales rocketed, and many people sat in front of a TV set for the very first time.
From now until after 5 o'clock this afternoon, television cameras take you into the heart of London to watch and share in each phase of this great day's events.
From around the world, thousands of dignitaries, Commonwealth servicemen, and their horses flocked to London. Queen Salote from Tonga was one of many who had travelled from across the globe to be present at this momentous occasion. Beneath grey skies, the great day finally dawned. On the morning of June the 2nd, 1953, Queen Elizabeth left Buckingham Palace for her coronation.
And here comes the sovereign's escort of the household cavalry. And behind, riding in the gold coach of state, her husband at her side, comes Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, down the Mall, past Trafalgar Square, to move along the Thames embankment to Westminster.
great tradition did not exclude innovation. The coronation was also filmed in colour by British Pathé News.
Will you solemnly promise and swear to govern the peoples of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the Union of South Africa, Pakistan, and Ceylon, and of your possession and the other territories to any of them belonging or pertaining, according to their respective laws and customs?
I solemnly promise so to do.
The promise is sealed at a faldstool before the altar. The Queen kisses the book and signs the form of oath.
Four Knights of the Garter bring forward a golden canopy which they hold over Her Majesty so that the sacred moment of anointing, normally never seen, is shielded from all eyes.
For the millions watching at home, it was spellbinding.
The sword of state is brought from the altar to be delivered to the Queen.
Elizabeth II would be the 40th monarch since William the Conqueror. Looking on was the 4-year-old heir to the throne, Prince Charles. "482 days after her father's death, Queen Elizabeth II was officially crowned. Amongst the first to declare allegiance was Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh.
I, Philip, will become your liege man of life and limb, and of earthly worship. In faith and truth I will bear unto you, to live and die, against all manner of folk, so help me God.
The country exploded into celebration, and coronation fever reached a new high. Street parties were in full flow, and schoolchildren enjoyed not only a day off, but a treat that had been rationed for years: sweets. From London's rooftops, radio commentators describe the scene across the world in 39 languages. A renewed sense of unity connected this former empire of nearly 650 million people. In New Zealand, there was a double celebration.
The proceedings were interrupted by thrilling news that one of their countrymen had succeeded in conquering Mount Everest. The crowd gasped and then roared applause for Edmund Hillary's achievement.
Back in London, all the Commonwealth nations played their part in the grandest procession in British history.
What a gay, colourful pageant. What a demonstration of heartfelt rejoicing in which all countries owing allegiance to Her Majesty took part.
As the Queen made her way back through the heaving streets of London, her 2 children waited patiently to be reunited with their mother. A million people braved the wet conditions just to catch a glimpse of their newly crowned sovereign. And they were finally rewarded when the Queen made her way onto Buckingham Palace's famous balcony. In a broadcast later that evening, she had these words for her people.
As this day draws to its close, I know that my abiding memory of it will be not only the solemnity and beauty of the ceremony, but the inspiration of your loyalty and affection. I thank you all from a full heart. God bless you all.
Just 4 days later, the Queen attended one of the most eagerly anticipated sporting events of the decade, the Coronation Derby. Epsom was packed to bursting point as 500,000 people, dressed in their Sunday best, prepared for a flutter on Britain's richest horse race. There had never been a day like it.
And now to watch the Coronation Derby comes Her Majesty the Queen. Her car, bearing the royal standard, moves slowly down the course from Tattenham Corner. Accompanied by the Duke of Edinburgh, who wears a grey topper for the occasion, the Queen waves acknowledgement to the welcoming cheers.
Racing has always had a firm place in the Queen's heart, and today she had her own runner, a thoroughbred called Oriole. But the new monarch faced stiff competition from champion jockey Gordon Richards, who had been made a Knight of the Realm that week.
They're on the last stretch now. We'll soon see if Pinzer can keep it up. He's still in front with Chikampur, Oriole and Pink Horse going gamely not far behind.
Oriole had run well, but Gordon Richards' horse Pinzer was an irresistible force.
But it's Pinzer's victory, and in comes Gordon to chalk up his first ever Derby win.
After 27 attempts, Sir Gordon Richards had finally claimed the one victory missing in his illustrious career, and was graciously congratulated by the Queen and Prince Philip. The coronation embodied the spirit of revival. For many, the 50s were finally changing. Post-war worries had vanished, replaced with an optimism that there were better days ahead, including an interesting new trend in fashion.
It seems incredible, but hair can be molded as easily as plasticine. Sometimes, however, even a normally reliable head of hair fails to rise to the occasion. And in emergencies like this, when it just isn't long enough, a switch of false hair is thrust into the breach. Not everyone's cup of tea, but this is no time to split hairs.
In November, the royal couple embarked on a spectacular 5.5-month tour of Empire and Commonwealth. Leaving the British weather firmly behind them, one of their first stops was Jamaica. As head of the Commonwealth of Nations, the Queen's aim was to strengthen the bond between countries previously under British rule. Covering 43,000 miles, Her Majesty's wardrobe was meticulously planned, taking into account the changing climates and allowing her to be clearly visible among the thousands of well-wishers. In Tonga, the monarch was reunited with the larger-than-life Queen Salote, who had made such an impact at her coronation. And in Australia and New Zealand, the excitement was overwhelming as they welcomed their first reigning monarch. On Bondi Beach, the royal couple remained on dry land as local lifeguards displayed their strength and skill. And at every stage of the tour, the Queen and Prince Philip honoured those from all over the Commonwealth who had lost their lives in war. The Royal Yacht Britannia met the Queen and Prince Philip for the final leg of this epic tour. And it was carrying extremely precious cargo. The young Prince Charles and Princess Anne were anxious to be reunited with their parents after being separated for 160 days. Together, they sailed to their final stop, Gibraltar, where the Queen received the keys to the city which had been under British rule since 1814. and its most notorious inhabitants would make it a royal family reunion to remember. Finally, on May the 15th, 1954, the greatest royal tour in history came to an end as the gates of Tower Bridge rose to welcome the Queen and her young family home. The Queen Mother and Princess Margaret were among the first to greet them. The huge popularity of the country's young monarch was clear, as London again turned out in vast numbers.
We are celebrating our return to this city of London, whose citizens only a few days ago gave us a welcome which warmed our hearts and which neither of us will ever forget. I am glad, too, to be able to thank once again our hosts all around the globe for the way in which they made our visits to them, short though some of them had to be, so enthralling and so agreeable.
But as she smiled outwardly to the cheering crowds, the Queen was anxious. Her younger sister Margaret had fallen in love with a divorcee. Since the coronation, press rumours had been spreading of her relationship with Group Captain Peter Townsend, a member of the royal household. For 2 years, they had been forced apart, but now Princess Margaret was 25 years old. She was free to marry whomever she wished. Under the scrutiny of the British public, Peter Townsend returned to London for her answer.
When he finally emerges, police have to clear a way for him. Not only the press want to see him. Whatever the answer to the question millions are asking, no one can doubt the warmth of the sympathy countless ordinary people have for him. A 2-hour visit to Clarence House, still without comment either from himself or from the palace, sweeps everything else from the front page of most London newspapers.
The question was whether this beautiful princess would relinquish her royal rights and entitlements for this divorced father of 2.
Princess Margaret's personal message issued from Clarence House began with these words: "I would like it to be known that I have decided not to marry Group Captain Peter Townsend. Mindful of the Church's teaching that Christian marriage is indissoluble and conscious of my duty to the Commonwealth, I have resolved to put these considerations before any others."
Holidays had been a distant pre-war memory, but by the mid-1950s, British families were enjoying the delights of holiday camps. Entertainment came in many forms.
Pram racing, as you can see, has its share of hazards for the inexperienced.
And the more enthusiastic were taking holidays on a budget to a whole new level.
If you're contemplating regular river holidays in this fashion, a bottle of champagne each time can be expensive, so Alan and Ron get used to launching her without the usual trimming.
The royal family relished summertime when they could relax at the family home Balmoral in the Scottish Highlands. Here, the young royal children developed a passion for their 4-legged friends. And the Queen and her young family liked to play their part in the local community. So when the church needed a new vestry, they came out in force to help at the village fete.
Within a few minutes of starting, they're doing a roaring trade, though Princess Anne's a little overwhelmed by it all at first. Oh, well, let's take the plunge and sell something. How about this one? It's only 4pence. This money business gets complicated when it's coming in so fast. Never mind, let's count it afterwards. These are very popular at the moment, madam. You'll take it? Thank you. Oh, yes, the chains.
While the Queen and her family enjoyed a relatively traditional existence, many were experiencing a new musical phenomenon. Post-war Britain was starting to party again with the help of rock and roll. Every street corner and music hall was brought to life with a new beat. And the West End of London was alight with international screen legends. No premiere was as glittering as the 1956 Royal Command film performance. With Princess Margaret at her side, the Queen and her sister proved to be the real stars of the show.
The stars are ready for presentation to Her Majesty. Here's A.E. Matthews, that fine old veteran, and Sylvia Sims. Many of these stars, of course, Joan Crawford, for example, the Queen has often met before. French star Brigitte Bardot, peeping round the corner, is already a favourite with British audiences. 22-year-old Brigitte came to Britain especially for this show. But the next star the Queen meets, Marilyn Monroe, over here making a film with Sir Laurence Olivier, is almost an established resident by now. Glamour is the cinema's business, but few of its events can be more glamorous than this.
As more and more public engagements filled up the royal diary, the young monarch and the Duke divided their time. And Prince Philip was quickly gaining a reputation for having a cheeky sense of humour.
Well, people may tell you that seagoing is a hard life, but it has its compensations. Take me, for instance. If I'd been at sea, I wouldn't have had to make this speech, and you wouldn't have had to listen to me.
But it wasn't all work and no play for the energetic Duke.
The Duke of Edinburgh, too live a personality to be a mere figurehead, faces strong criticism in some church circles for his Sunday sport activities. His critics say these activities set a bad example.
It is our contention that to permit one form of sport on Sundays is to open wide the floodgates for the bringing in of all forms of sport and ultimately professional games, which would mean finally a 7-day working week for all and the day of rest and worship erased from the statute book.
Other people feel that the Duke, whose public duties take him north, south, east and west 6 days a week, should have the same freedom on the 7th as most of his fellow countrymen exercise.
The Duke of Edinburgh has been much criticised recently for playing polo and cricket on Sunday afternoons. I think this happens because people are confused about the meaning of the Christian Sunday. The Duke of Edinburgh is serving God by reading the lessons at church on Sunday morning. He is equally well serving God by playing polo as hard as he can on Sunday afternoon. Away with these 20th century Pharisees, and all honour to your Royal Highness for bearing witness to the Christian faith in such a balanced way, and may you have the best of luck in every chukker and innings you play this season.
With the royal children growing up fast, the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh decided they should have a modern education. Though the young Prince Charles did not share his father's talents for every sport.
Not only parents are watching, the railings are well lined too, as Charles takes over the bat. Here it comes. And there it went.
But this wasn't going to deter his enthusiasm.
The star turn of the display is one which Charles suggested. He saw it done, with rather heavier equipment, at the Royal Tournament, and the headmaster adopted the idea.
In 1957, the future heir to the throne started boarding school, and in doing so, broke with royal tradition.
Yes, this 8-year-old boy is creating a great precedent. He is the first heir to the British throne to go to school. He will be the first King of England to have been educated as a boy among other boys, which is exactly how his parents, and his future subjects would wish it.
After returning to power in 1951, Winston Churchill was still at number 10 for his 80th birthday 3 years later. Telegrams and gifts poured into Downing Street, among them a cake sent by a Polish man who'd survived a Nazi concentration camp. In a packed Westminster Hall, Churchill was presented with a Book of Honour signed by 2,500 MPs from his own party and the opposition.
No one has ever received a similar mark of honour before. There has not been anything like it in British history, and indeed I doubt whether any of the modern democracies abroad has shown such a degree of kindness and generosity to a party politician who has not yet retired and may at any time be involved in controversy.
But he seemed less impressed with his other birthday present.
The portrait is a remarkable example of modern art. Ladies and gentlemen, I am now nearing the end of my journey. I am sure I shall never be able fully to express my gratitude for this wonderful honor.
Less than a year later, in April 1955, the great wartime leader decided to step down. This grand old man, who'd been a dear friend of her father, had steered the Queen through the first 3 years of her reign.
It has always been Sir Winston's habit, when Prime Minister, to have an audience of the Queen on Tuesday night at Buckingham Palace. But this is the last. Now, the man who through the darkest days of the war would report regularly to the Sovereign all the great affairs of state, all the triumphs and all the failures, is no longer Prime Minister.
57-year-old Anthony Eden was to be the Queen's second Prime Minister.
Long versed in the affairs of state, we wish him well in the heavy tasks that lie ahead.
He would be put to the test quickly in July 1956, when one of the biggest crises of the decade unfolded. Egypt had seized control of the Suez Canal, the main supply route between Europe and Asia. Although Britain knew she had to relinquish control eventually, the new Egyptian leader, Colonel Nasser, had his own ambitious schedule.
2 years ago, Britain agreed to withdraw her troops. The Suez Canal would become Egypt's property in 1968. Now, Nasser tears the agreement up. The canal, he says, is nationalized forthwith. The £36 million annual profit will become Egyptian revenue.
As tensions mounted, Prime Minister Anthony Eden had a clear message.
There can be no agreed settlement which leaves the canal in the unfettered control of one man or one government.
Against the advice of his ministers, he conspired with France and Israel to invade.
Within hours, the leading Israeli columns are driving towards the canal. Israeli troops and aircraft move towards the front, past abandoned guns and ruined tanks.
In response, Egypt's Colonel Nasser closed this vital shipping lane by sinking every ship in the canal. The knock-on effect in Britain was a massive fuel crisis.
As fast as the stuff comes in, it's gone. At $6 bob a gallon, too. Blimey, at that price, owning a cigarette lighter puts you in the super tax class. On a pub crawl, at least you know when closing time will be, but on a pump crawl, closing time keeps on catching up with you.
Forced into a humiliating climb down, Anthony Eden resigned. He'd lasted less than 2 years as Prime Minister.
Thank you very much for all your kindness to me, all of you, during my period of office. I wish my successor all good fortune and Godspeed to you all. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Harold Macmillan would become the Queen's third Prime Minister.
This afternoon, the Queen did me the great honour to ask me to form a government. I have accepted this duty. We have a difficult task before us in this country, all of us, and it will need our courage and our strength. And we shall need the sympathy and the goodwill and understanding of everyone in the country, whatever their party or beliefs. I believe we shall have that sympathy, and I'm certain that with the efforts of all, we can succeed.
In his previous position as Minister of Housing, Macmillan had introduced a radical form of urban living. Now, new towns like Stevenage were taking shape. These carefully planned communities were beckoning the nation into a modern way of life.
Notice the refreshing absence of traffic congestion. That's because no vehicles are allowed in the shopping area. Wherever one turns, the outlook is gay and eye-catching. The designers and architects have gone all out for comfort and simplicity. For instance, there are no curbs to hamper prams or pedestrians. Street lighting is contemporary and effective and blends in with the strictly functional surroundings. You'll have already noticed how the rural look of Stevenage has been retained by leaving many of the original trees apparently growing out of the concrete. Here, then, is the design for living of the future.
And in the 1950s, mother belonged in the kitchen. Quality foods and appliances were advertised as being every woman's dream. Designers of the decade were getting in touch with their feminine side.
Notice that the dressing table has 3 storage compartments, while the wardrobe has doors of plasticized fabric that slide up instead of opening out. If you're wondering where they go, the answer's down the back.
Even the most modest of household essentials were getting a sophisticated makeover.
Sensible people spend approximately 1/3 of their lives in supine bliss. The ingenuity of bed designers is our subject, and this particular example underlines the fact that we are living in a highly mechanized age. And a quick flick of the wrist ensures that the curtains are properly closed. And if you just can't sleep, you can have a whale of a time pressing buttons all night.
The young Queen played her own part in this brave new age as the champion of British ingenuity, even launching Britain into a nuclear age.
It is with pride that I now open Calder Hall, Britain's first atomic power station.
And with her finger firmly on the pulse of new technology, the Queen made the first direct long-distance call to Edinburgh without an operator.
The Lord Provost of Edinburgh speaking.
This is the Queen speaking from Bristol. Good afternoon, Lord Provost.
Good afternoon, Your Majesty. May I, with humble duty, offer you the loyal greetings of the citizens of Edinburgh.
Thank you. And would you, Lord Provost, please convey my greetings to them? I'm always interested in any development which brings my people closer together. In a few moments, Bristol subscribers will be able to make trunk calls by merely dialing the right number up to a distance of some 300 miles. In time, the whole United Kingdom will enjoy the advantages of this new service which the Post Office has introduced.
May I express my gratitude to Your Majesty for the honor which you have done to me and to Scotland in making the first call in this new service to me.
Thank you. Goodbye, Lord Provost.
Goodbye, Your Majesty.
Lasting 2 minutes, 5 seconds, the call cost just 4p. Elizabeth II embarked on her final royal tour of the decade in June 1959. As Queen of Canada, she opened the St. Lawrence Seaway, a colossal feat of engineering which connected the Great Lakes to the Atlantic Ocean.
It is a magnificent monument to the enduring friendship of our two nations and to their partnership in the development of North America.
The President of the United States, Dwight Eisenhower, did his best to address Quebec's French-speaking population.
Je suis très heureux de me trouver, retrouver parmi vous au Canada où il y a un an. J'ai fait un si agréable séjour.
As the 1950s drew to a close, the new Queen had made a dazzling impression on the world. But what the public didn't know was that her glamorous sister was now secretly engaged, and that she was expecting her third child. The 1960s was going to start with a bump. In the next decade, 4 boys break hearts and top charts.
Did you have a chance to get away from anybody at any time on the trip?
Yeah, he got away from me twice.
The Queen and Princess Margaret start a royal baby boom, and England take on Germany in arguably the most famous football match in sporting history.